All right, I want to welcome everybody to Junior Bike Chat. Tonight we have a special guest, Brad Sohner, and the title tonight is Social Media, Sponsors, and You. I want to just go through a few things before I introduce our speaker. We do have some upcoming episodes. We're actually going to have USA Cycling on in a couple of weeks on July 23rd. We'll be talking with Kelsey Erickson of Safe Sport, and she'll be taking us through some of the programs that they have for athlete well-being that they've started this year. The following week, we're going to have a special appearance by Dr. Kristen Diefenbach, who's a leading youth sport psychologist, and she'll be going through the motivational strategies that she actually teaches in her camps that she runs for USA Cycling. And she'll be doing that on July 30th. We're still working on our series on selfless philanthropy, where we're going to be actually talking with some U23 riders who have started their own 501c3s and things of that nature for epic work. We're going to then be going into inequities in sports. We're doing this in partnership with the Fast Freddy Foundation. So I'll be looking for more information for interns for the summer. So please contact either myself, Sean at gsandiamo.com, or Katie at Juniors Matters. We do have a number of different projects that we're working on. We're always looking for juniors to be handling those. I want to give a special thanks to Elijah from Mission Devo in Atlanta, Georgia, who's our junior moderator tonight, as well as Katie Burford, who's on the backside, and she'll be monitoring the QA boxes. And then lastly, we have Devin Wilson, who's been helping out with IT support. Hopefully we won't need him tonight. We've needed him in the past. Just a couple housekeeping items. This is being live streamed on our Facebook channel, Youth Cycling Association, and then recordings of this in previous weeks are actually found on our YouTube channel. Leslie lifted that and putting that to work. Please place your questions for the panelists in the QA box on Zoom. Though we do monitor, Katie will be monitoring those throughout the evening. So I'm going to turn off my sharing here. So there we go. And so I want to introduce our two panelists, really, and our guest moderator. And I'm going to start with Elijah. And really, what drew you to cycling? Why do you ride a bike?
So it all started when I was about 6 years old, and a family friend of ours, he wasn't a racer. He was just a guy who loved riding his bike. And so he kind of taught me how to ride a bike and took me on started me taking on longer rides, like on the Silver Comet and stuff. And that's how I really started. And then as I got more and more older and able to ride more, I started doing events like Bragg, the bicycle ride across Georgia. And so I met some people that raced on the velodrome and raced bikes before they started doing this. And so one day, one of the guys that I've met at Bragg, him and my mom became friends, and they started talking. He was able to take me to the velodrome for the first time, and I got to do my first race on the velodrome. And that's where I sort of knew that I really wanted to become a racer. I always had dreams of racing bikes. It'd be really fun, but I never really knew if I'd really like it. But the first race on the velodrome, I knew I'd have to come back and do more. And I was really good at it, and so I kept coming back. And then eventually, Greg Lathan from Mission Source, he offered me a spot on the team, and now it's kind of, I've been racing for I think three years now, and that's kind of the history of it. So.
And how old are you?
I'm 17, about to turn 18 on July 28th.
So you've actually been riding bikes for 8 years already.
Yeah. I've ridden bikes for a long time.
Yeah. So that's quite a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like you were telling a story about how you actually got on to Mission. And it didn't sound like it was just a straightforward pathway. Can you explain that?
No.
Can you take us through that process?
Yeah. So, me and my mom, we were new to the whole cycling team, and it was very confusing. And also at the same time, there was a bike shop I live in Georgia. There's a bike shop in Tucker called Snyder Shops, and they also wanted me to be on their cycling team. That they were beginning to start, and so, you know, like we were confused. We didn't really know what we were doing, so we joined like I joined the Snyder team, thinking I didn't have a team. And then one day I went to the track in like the Snyder kit, and Greg was like, we invited you to the team. And me and my mom didn't really understand, like, before he did that, like, he invited us. And so there was just a lot of confusion at first. And then we talked to Greg, and he was like, yes, we really want you to be on the team. And then so I left Snyder and became on Mission Source. And there's still confusion now, but we're still, yeah.
Are you friends with everybody still?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hagen, one of the main mechanics at Snyder, he's a really nice guy. He moved out of Georgia, but when he comes, sometimes we'll ride together and stuff like that.
Oh, great, great.
Yeah.
So Brad, tell me your story. How did you get into the sport?
Yeah, I had kind of a unique way to get into the sport. I was driving past a bike race one day when I was a kid with my parents, and I had two brothers, and my mom, being the greatest mom in the world, if you ask me, agreed that we could stop. We just saw this bike race on the side of the road, and we thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was actually a mountain bike race. And so, three boys in the car, we saw these bikers covered in dirt. We thought it was the coolest thing ever. So we stopped, we watched the race, fell in love with it, went home, got our bikes, started riding. And then we went back the next weekend to do a race at the same park. They were doing sort of weekly races there. And I never really got into racing that much. I really started working in the sport pretty quickly. When I was like 14, 15 years old, I started really just volunteering with a company that would set up the races. So we would travel around, and they did the fence and the stage and the timing system and all that stuff that goes into a bike race. And so that was where I spent most of my time kind of learning about cycling and falling in love with cycling was behind the scenes. But I got to watch races every day. I got to travel all over, and it's hard not to fall in love with the sport when you're watching races every day. So for me, it was criterium racing. That was most of what we did during the summer. So I was traveling all over and seeing these crits. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so I was always volunteering for trips and jobs, and I always wanted to see more races and do more things. And I kind of slowly started to work my way up in that company. So I started as just a laborer, it's just the bottom level. And then I kind of became a manager. I got to manage some other workers and started going to races by myself to manage crews. And then when I was 16, 17 years old, I really started taking announcing seriously. I had a lot of people that had said, hey, you have a good voice and you have a passion for the sport. You should try announcing. But I wasn't really sure that I wanted to be an announcer. It was a scary thing to think about, getting up on a stage with a microphone and talking to all these people. But eventually at some smaller races, I just kind of tried it out. A lot of announcers were really kind with letting me try to be an announcer, getting some reps in on the mic. And it kind of snowballed from there. And then before I knew it, I was getting a degree in journalism. I studied journalism at Ohio University. I also got a degree in advertising management. And then when it was time to graduate college, I had a lot of races that were hiring me to come announce their races. And so it was kind of a big leap to decide if I was going to be a professional bike race announcer. But it's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I figured I had to try it. And then before I knew it, I was making a living as a bike race announcer. And so from there, announcing turned into television. I started producing some of the live streams and TV shows that you see, national championships and stuff like that. And now I also help brands in cycling figure out kind of where to spend their money, how to spend their money, how to get the most sort of bang for their buck when they decide they want to come into cycling. So it's been a long journey. I never thought I would be a professional bike race announcer when I was a kid. I definitely never dreamed of, working in the sport or anything like that. But life's crazy, and you never know what's going to happen.
Right, right. So it's interesting. I mean, you did your degree actually in what you're making your profession on, and that's somewhat rare these days. You know, people seem to jump
Yeah.
from what they got their degree into something completely different.
Yeah, and actually, when I was getting my degree, it was not to become a bike race announcer. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. That was sort of my path. I was, editor of the school newspaper in high school, and I wanted to go on to either work at, a news organization like the New York Times or something like that, or an advertising agency. So that was kind of the career path that I was pursuing, and it was very different from cycling. It definitely wasn't. It wasn't conducive to becoming a bike race announcer. And I even had some professors in college that kind of said, hey, it's time to start taking real work seriously and putting this bike racing behind you. But I also had a few really good professors who encouraged me to go after it. And they were the ones that were right. So I'm glad I listened.
Great, great. So, I mean, tonight, I mean, we've been a little bit off topic, kind of seeing how you guys got involved in the sport. But tonight, I mean, you're going to take us through how to use social media. I mean, I'm a very rudimentary level, so I think you're speaking to the audience right here, right? Is I'm hoping that you'll edify me on how to improve what I do and ensuring that I'm doing it properly.
Yeah, in social media, it's becoming more and more important. We see it in the news almost every day, good stuff and bad stuff. And so I kind of just want to take everyone through sort of what we can do to make sure that we're not getting into any of the bad stuff, and then the good stuff that we can do too, to make it better for everyone, and make sure that it makes sense. So let me put up my window here. Oops, I gotta get back to mine.
Just a quick reminder to everybody: if you have questions, drop them in the QA box, and we'll get to them.
All right. So I call it social media 2.0 because we're kind of in this new world of social media. And like I said, it's more dangerous than ever, but there's also some really cool stuff that you can do now that we couldn't do before. So we'll talk about that. I'm sure you guys have heard this from your parents, teachers, coaches over and over and over. We all know the dangers of social media, right? I think that's been driven in kids these days. But it's kind of important to know why it's so dangerous and how we get into trouble, and then what kind of good stuff we can do. And then we're also going to talk about how to deal with controversial topics, because there's a lot of them out there today, and I think a lot of you probably have things that you want to say to the world, and so we're going to talk about how we can how to say those things to make sure that you're protected and you're protecting those around you. So it's a little bit about kind of what you can say and what you can't say. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that everything is social media. Everything that you do on the internet is tracked, it's saved, and it's going to be there forever. We know the typical standard social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, right? That stuff you put out there that anyone can see. But what about the other stuff, the stuff that we think is maybe a little more private, like a Snapchat, a WhatsApp message, text, comments on a website, emails that you write, even Zoom calls like this? This stuff can all get recorded, it can all get saved. And so you have to be careful anytime that you're on really any electronic device about what you're saying, who you're saying it to, and sort of go through the tests that we're going to talk about as to whether or not this is fit for social media. And then I also put games in there. I think this is one thing that people really overlook, that because more people are playing games now, whether it's like Fortnite or PlayStation, Call of Duty, right? You have a bad game, you get angry, you maybe say something mean to the other players on there. That stuff gets saved and that can come back to bite you. So it's really important to be careful anytime you're on any sort of digital platform about what you're posting and what you're saying. And even things like Strava and Zwift can get you into trouble, but can also be good things. And you're probably thinking, how could I possibly get in trouble on Strava? What could I say on Strava that would get me in trouble? Well, there was a story from California where there was some cities trying to figure out if they were going to allow mountain biking trails to go through their cities. And they basically said, you guys can use the trails as long as you don't go too fast. There were very specific rules about how fast the people could go. Now, a lot of people went out and used them. A lot of people rode, but a lot of people also logged the ride on Strava, and they logged their too fast times or too fast speeds for the trail. And it ended up getting the trail shut down, and it ruined riding for a lot of people in these communities because they were great mountain bike trails. A lot of people used them, but because a few people were irresponsible and then shared that on social media that they didn't really think was social media, it affected a lot more people. And so that's another important thing to remember with social media. It's not just about the impact that it has on you. It's about the impact that the social media is going to have on everyone around you, whether it's your friends, your family, your team, your community. And so at the very bottom here, you see me talking about the pyramid. And I have this picture of this guy. His name is Travis Barker. He's a drummer for a band called Blink-182. You guys might have heard of the band. And on Travis's chest, he has this tattoo that says, "Can I say?" And he got that tattoo because when he was a kid, ever since he was very, very little, he was always asking his mom, "Can I say this? Can I say this? Can I say this?" Like kids do, right? We want to know what we can say. But then he found out as he got older and he had record labels and sponsors and bosses, he was still saying it. And he kind of got the tattoo because it was like, you never stop wondering, can I say? And so it was a question that he kind of deals with throughout his life, not just as a kid when you have your parents to deal with, but eventually you're going to have bosses and all kinds of people that they have to be careful of. So my biggest piece of advice for deciding whether or not you should post something is if there's a tiny bit of doubt that it might be controversial, don't hit the send button just yet. When in doubt, throw it out. You have to think about these tweets that you're going to send and think about would your grandma approve. Would I read this tweet out loud to my grandma? I always think that's a good test because there's a lot of jokes and stuff that you would think like, oh yeah, me and my friends will think this is funny, but is grandma going to think it's funny when I read it to her? And so before you hit that send button, I always encourage people, read it out loud to your grandma and think about what reaction grandma is going to have. And then if you're still not sure, consult with your pyramid about topics that are important to you. And the pyramid is something that I'm going to be talking about a lot more in this presentation because it's a good way to help determine what's okay to say and who it's going to affect if you do say something. So the first question you have to ask in the pyramid is whether or not it's good for you, right at the bottom. And if you're thinking about saying it, then you probably think that it's good for you. The next question is it good for your family? Is it going to affect your family in a way, either positive or negative? Because if it's good for you, it's probably good for your family. And that's kind of building up the pyramid. Then you have to ask, is it good for your community? Is it good for the people around you? Is it good for the people you go to school with? Is it good for the people you work with? Is what you say going to affect their lives in a positive or negative way? So you have to look at the people that you live with, the people around you in your life, and think about how what you're about to say or post is going to affect them. And then we get into the teams and sponsors. And this isn't nearly as important as the community, your community and your family. Those are bigger blocks on the pyramid because without these base blocks, your family, your community, your team, the sponsors aren't going to be there. And so you have to make sure that your pyramid is solid with your family and your community and your team before you get into, is this good for my sponsors? And so what sponsors want and what sponsors are looking for, it's all built on these building blocks of creating a good life, both on and off social media. So always ask, is it good for me? Then is it good for my family? Then is it good for my community? And then you can start thinking about stuff that's good for your team and then figure out if it's good for your sponsor. So this was a social media thing in the news pretty recently that I'm sure a lot of you saw. The guy that started Dirty Kansas got fired because of a Facebook post that he made. Now, I'm sure he thought when he was making this Facebook post that it was a truth for him. This was something that he believed in or he thought. But I want to go back to the pyramid and figure out kind of where this fell apart for Dirty Kansas. First question, is it good for me? Well, he probably thought that that was his idea, that was his feeling, and he wanted to share that. Is it good for my family? Well, he probably asked that too. And you don't see any immediate issues with that. But the third question, is it good for my community? That's where it fell apart for this issue because he made people in the community feel uncomfortable. And that's a problem for his team and for his sponsors. So it goes further and further up the pyramid if one of the things is uncomfortable. And so in this case, Jim Cummings, the Dirty Kansas founder, made his community feel uncomfortable. That made the team feel uncomfortable. And ultimately that made the sponsors feel uncomfortable. So even something that you do that makes someone else on the pyramid feel uncomfortable, that's going to trickle up eventually to the sponsors and the teams. And if we want to keep racing and stay on these teams and keep all the benefits that come with teams, then we have to make sure that everything on the pyramid is taken care of.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay to like post something negative, or do we always have to keep every post as positive as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you feel that something needs to change, or you feel there's something bad out there or negative out there, absolutely talk about it. You know, I don't want to tell anyone to shy away from any tough subjects, but my advice would be make sure that what you're going to say is aligning with your pyramid first. And a lot of times that means going directly to your pyramid and talking to those people and saying, hey, I really feel strongly about this issue. You know, I want to talk about this on social media. I want to start a discussion about this thing. Is this okay for my family, for my community, for my team, and for my sponsors? And your family, they're easy to talk to. You know where your family stands. Your community, that's something that you have to decide for yourself. And then your team, you can go to your team directly and express something that's important to you. Okay. And if it's the right team for you, then they'll tell you that, you know, we want you to say what you want to say. We want you to express yourself. And hopefully you find that support from your team. And if you want to say stuff and maybe it doesn't line up with the pyramid, it's okay to shift the pyramid a little bit, right? We can find new teams, we can find new sponsors until all of that stuff is aligned perfectly. So you can absolutely say negative stuff on social media, but just make sure that you run through the test of these 5 questions and make sure that that negative stuff isn't going to negatively affect other people in your pyramid.
Okay.
So this is another great example. A rider named Ryan Mullen. And this, I was kind of involved with this last year. It was at the Tour of Guangxi. It's the last race on the World Tour in China. And it's a pretty new race. They were just getting into it. But we're really trying to expand racing in China because it's a big market. And so the UCI allowed Tour of Guangxi to get on at the end of the calendar. And Ryan Mullen sent this tweet out during the race. Now, it was understandable. These guys had a tough time in China, but he said, a place I won't be sad if I never set foot in it again. Now, he was just complaining about not having coffee and saying he didn't like the food. And so, you know, he really wasn't, I don't think, trying to say something really mean, but it caused some really big problems for the race. We saw articles like this get published from that one tweet. Then all of a sudden, everyone picked the tweet up and started publishing other articles. And before we knew it, the race was in real trouble because the entire point of the race, the whole reason that we get to go to China and race our bikes is to promote tourism in China. And so when they had this guy, Ryan Mullen, saying all kinds of bad stuff about the race, well, that wasn't very good for the sponsors, obviously, and it wasn't good for the team. So Ryan kind of broke down with, is it good for my team? You know, he thought about him and his family. It doesn't really affect his immediate community. But when it comes to, is it good for my team? He really didn't think about how this would affect his team. Why? Well, because he rides for Trek Segafredo, and they were in China, where Trek sells a lot of bikes. And so when he said a mean thing about the race immediately went to the team and went to the sponsor and said, hey, this is a problem. This isn't good. And so for the rest of the trip, Ryan in the Trek Segafredo team was kind of on the bad side of the Chinese fans. They certainly didn't make any fans for them. And Trek, as a sponsor, obviously was not real happy about being sort of the odd team out at Tour of China. And so, again, if you would have just taken a few minutes to kind of think about this pyramid and think about the 5 levels of people that everything you say affects, I think maybe he would have thought twice about posting. Now, it's not all bad stuff on social media, because you can do really, really cool stuff on social media too. I don't know if you guys saw this, like last week, a couple weeks ago, Legion of Los Angeles, one of my favorite teams out there, raised like $120,000 over that. I think they're still raising money. And a lot of people will try to replicate this, but you have to look at this and say, why did it work so well? Why were these guys able to raise so much money? How did Legion raise $120,000? Well, it's because everything that they do checks off the boxes on the pyramid, right? If it's good for, let's say, Justin, well, it's probably good for his family. And if it's good for the family, it's good for the community. And if it's good for the community, it's good for the team. And if it's good for the team, it's good for sponsors. So when we talk about sponsors, it's really easy to say, I'm just going to go out and look for sponsors, or I'm going to ask sponsors for money, or I just want to make the sponsors happy so they keep giving us money. But what I'm really trying to show is that what sponsors want is a lot more than just that tweet or just that Facebook post or just that thank you. They want to see a really strong pyramid beneath them. So they want to see that you have a good relationship with your team. And if you have a good relationship with your team, then you can have a good relationship with your community. And the sponsors and the brands want to make sure that they're kind of on a solid pyramid. And so that's why Legion and Justin, were able to share such a strong message, because every single, all 5 steps of this pyramid, they were helping people. It's good for them, good for their family, good for their community, good for their team, and good for their sponsors. So here's another. Yeah, go ahead.
Back talking about the trek rider. Like if he were to be taken off of the team, like they wouldn't allow him to race anymore. And would this type of, I guess, conduct on social media follow him and perhaps prevent him from getting another offer of like another pro team?
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, tweets are like tattoos, like that guy in the first slide. No matter where you post, it's going to be there forever. And when teams go to sign riders, or really anyone goes to, to make a deal, whether it's a new job hiring you, or you're maybe trying to do a business deal with somebody, or it's a team trying to hire you, everyone's going to do their research. That's the first thing that you do, is go research these riders. And so this kind of stuff comes up because you don't want the trouble of dealing with these guys. If they show that they're not really capable of going through this 5-step process, they're not really capable, they're loose in what they tweet, then teams will absolutely think twice about signing those riders to the team. And sometimes sponsors will complain to the team too. If a sponsor is concerned about an individual rider, a lot of times the sponsor will go to the team and say, hey, look, I know that guy's a great bike racer. I know he can win races for you, but that's not really the guy that we want representing our brand. And so then the team has to go elsewhere. I've heard dozens of stories where sponsors can either put a rider on a team or take a rider off the team. So yeah, one mistake like that, unfortunately can follow you around for a long time. So you have to be really careful and try and minimize it, right? But if you do make a mistake, just own up to it. What you do after making a mistake is just as important as the mistake you made. And so again, everything that you do is being watched, and no matter how old it is, the teams and the sponsors will be watching it for sure.
Okay.
So my next sort of positive social media thing is Tour de Quarantine. This was a sort of a personal project that I did over the last few weeks over quarantine. And this was a way that I was able to use social media in a really positive way to do some really good stuff for everyone on the pyramid. Now, you look at the pyramid, is it good for me? Yeah, I was really bored. And so I needed something to do. And so checks that box off. Is it good for my family? Yeah, it kept me out of their hair. I was driving them crazy and they were like, you need to go to a bike race or something. And so it made my family happy. Is it good for my community? We were all really bored and I wanted to do something to make people smile. I was trying to figure out, what positive thing can I put out into the world in this sort of dark time of the pandemic? And so it made my community smile. It made a lot of bike racers happy, it made them feel like we were having a bike race again. Now, obviously, I'm not on a team, but I do have sponsors and deal with sponsors and stuff like that. And so I had a ton of people calling and emailing and texting asking about sponsoring Tour de Quarantine. And so, because they saw that this Tour de Quarantine thing was built on a really good pyramid, those sponsors wanted to come and be the top part of the pyramid. And so this is one way that, I was able to kind of create social media content and create your own value, which is, one of the good things that social media can be used for. I'm afraid that this presentation is going to seem a lot like I'm just trying to scare you away from social media, because there is a lot of dangerous stuff that can happen on social media for your professional and personal career, but there's a lot of really good stuff that can happen too. And if we just kind of focus on the good stuff that we can create, then you can be a lot better at social media, better for your team, better for your community, better for your family, and ultimately better for your sponsors at the top. So people always ask me, how do I create good social media? How do I make cool social media? How do I create content? And I always tell them, to be impressive on social media, you have to be impressive in real life first. Social media is just something to reflect what you're doing in real life. It's just a way to share who you are in person in a digital format. And so everything that you do, you have to think, is this impressive in real life? What am I sharing? What am I doing in my life that's positive that I can share on social media? Because it's very hard to just create content on social media that's just good. And so start with being a good person in real life, helping your community, helping in your team, helping other riders, helping your family, because that's the kind of stuff that makes much better social media, that helps you create content. And so the other question is, what do sponsors want, right? And this goes back to the pyramid too. The first thing they want is they want you to be real. They want you to be a real person. And this is just like I said before, they want you to be a good person in real life. They want it to be raw and authentic. And they want you to have a strong pyramid. They want you to be involved in your community. They want you to have a good relationship with your teams. They want you to have a good relationship with your family. And they want you to have a good relationship with yourself. And so if they see a weakness in that pyramid, that's going to make sponsors think twice. The third thing is they want you to be reliable. They want to make sure that if they sponsor you or your team, that you're not a risk for them. They want to rely on you to carry a good message, to carry a positive message for their brand. I can't tell you enough how valuable it is to be able to just not have to worry about an ambassador or an endorser or an athlete or a team or whatever as a sponsor. To be able to say, look, this person is solid. You can put your money into this team. We don't have to worry about anything they're going to say or do online. And then the last thing is they want you to be creative. And this is probably the easiest thing to type and the hardest thing to do, to put into a PowerPoint presentation. But they want to see new ways that you're kind of sharing your life. They want to see you opening up and talking about them in different ways too. And so this kind of gets into the good stuff that we can do. And I'll just give you a few quick examples. These are really easy things to do that can make you more attractive to a sponsor. The first thing that I see that way too many riders overlook is posting your ride. A ton of people just don't post their ride. But if you want to be a cyclist, you want to be a pro, you've got to post your Strava, your Instagram, everything out there, even TikTok some rides if you have to. The next thing is adventure and learning. This is really good stuff to share because this makes good content. If there's a question that you have, something you're not sure about, a journey that you're going to go on, like, hey, I want to try and convert my bike into a single speed. That's a great project. That's a great journey that you're going to take, and you're going to learn stuff along the way about how to do that. Sponsors would love to see you sharing that with other people because that helps you connect with your community, one of the blocks on the pyramid, right? Maybe you're going on an adventure ride with your friends. You're going to try a new road that you've never been on before. You're going to go ride somewhere that you've never been. You're going to do the longest ride that your friends have ever done together. That's a great thing to document and share because there's other people out there that are going to have that same experience. And so anytime you're going through a new experience or you're learning something new, there's a good chance that someone else out there wants to learn too. And so that's great stuff to share. Whether you're trying something new or learning something new, you can share that with your social media, and that's really easy content to create because you don't have to be an expert. It's okay to share that stuff as you go. The third thing, super obvious, support your teammates. They all have Twitters and Facebooks and Instagrams, all that stuff. They're making videos on YouTube. Share their content, engage with them, comment on it, ask them how they made it, ask them how they did it. social media goes both ways. You have to put stuff out there, but you also have to sort of give stuff, as well. So replying to comments, answering questions, engaging people that make stuff. That's a great way to sort of build your social media following. So it goes both ways. It's not just about posting stuff, but you also have to kind of support other people out there that are posting. If you see something cool that you like, don't be afraid to share it. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. Say, hey, I really like how you did this. I want to learn how to do it. What gave you the idea? How did you come up with the idea? That kind of stuff. People are usually willing to share at least how to get started on making content. So if you see something that you like, or you see your friends posting, make sure you share that stuff and engage with it. And then the last thing is always be promoting. You can follow me at Brad Sohner. See, I'm always promoting. You got to keep your social media at the top of people's minds. And so make sure that it's on, anywhere that you have a chance that you might be getting in front of sponsors. You should have a social media profile that you're proud of and that you want to share with them and that you want to get in front of them. So that you say, hey, if you just go look at my social media, if you just go look at my Facebook, my Instagram, whatever, I'm sure you're going to want to sign me. I'm sure you're going to want to have me on the team. I'm sure you're going to want to sponsor me, give me free wheels, give me money, whatever you're looking for from the sponsor. And so it's really easy to keep promoting your social media, but sometimes it's tough because you feel like, oh, these people don't want to hear from me. Nobody wants to see my posts anymore. That's an easy track to get into, but you kind of have to push through that and just keep promoting, keep pushing, and keep making content. That's another huge thing. So you don't have to feel pressure to create content, but you should have a place where people can go on the internet to learn about you, just at least as like a landing page. So I can go to your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, and at least get a feel for what you're about and what kind of person you are. And so that's another really important reason to have social media and keep a good profile. So have a good profile, keep promoting the profile, and before you know it, you'll have people banging down your DMs looking to sponsor you and give you money.
We have two questions. One is from CJ about the Tour de Quarantine. He wants to know how long did it take you every day to make the videos, and did people buy any of the merch?
Yeah, it took a lot longer than you probably thought. I spent like maybe 4 to 6 hours a day on Tour de Quarantine. Part of it was because I'm kind of a perfectionist, and so I would keep trying to tweak stuff. I want this to be a little better. I want this to be a little better. And each day got tougher and tougher. And I was blown away by the sport. We sold over $5,000 in merchandise, which was pretty good for something I was just bored sitting in my room. And we actually donated all the money that we made from the merchandise to the USA Cycling Foundation. And so that was another great way to kind of build the pyramid to help my community, help my team, and help my sponsors. And so, the merchandise actually did really well. And I spent probably more time than I should have on Tour de Quarantine.
And then I have a question. What's the best platform as a upcoming elite cyclist, and many of what's the best one we should use, and the place where people will see us the most?
See, you have to use all of them, and that's kind of the thing about social media is, one, you never know who's reading, and two, you never know where you're going to meet those people. I've gotten jobs from people I've met on Facebook, from people I've met on Twitter, from people I've met on Instagram. I even had a person who saw a Snapchat story that I posted and said, hey, are you an announcer? I'm doing this race. Can you come announce my race? And so I would say the more, the better. The more you can put yourself out there, the more places you can put yourself in front of the people that you want to meet, the better. And this is also a good time to talk about sort of forcing yourself to use other social media channels. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a huge Facebooker. Not a ton of my friends are on Facebook. I think it's kind of a generational thing. And so my first thought is not to jump on Facebook and post something that I did, or, jump on Facebook and share the videos that I make. But Facebook has a lot of users. There are a lot of people that are still on Facebook every day. And we can't overlook them just because they're not on our social media. They're not in our world, in our circle. And so as a bike racer, if you're trying to get your name out there and you're trying to market yourself to teams, it's really important to get on every platform that you can and to put your name out there in as many places as you can, even if you don't want to, even if it's maybe not a social media channel that you would be on for fun, you kind of have to look at it something that you have to do to try to get to that next level. So I would encourage everyone to get a profile on everything, at least so there's a place that I can go just see who you are. If they use Facebook primarily, then you want to make sure that someone who uses Facebook as their main social media can find you easily and say, hey, this is what they're about. This is who they are. This is where they're from, that kind of stuff.
And then CJ, we have two more questions. One is from CJ, and I know this is a big thing between juniors. It's is it okay for us to have, say, a private account that's not in our name on like Instagram or Snapchat or anything? Somewhere where we can like sort of be more freely on what we post.
I would say be careful with anonymous or private accounts because they're never truly anonymous or private. There's a lot of ways to figure out who those accounts belong to. And I've seen it happen before where people tried to use an anonymous account, maybe to answer some haters or to say something that, they didn't feel like they could say. It's really tempting to want to go in and say, oh, I'll show this person. I'm just going to get on my other account. Yeah. But there's a few ways that they can figure out that that's you. Maybe you forget to switch the username. Maybe they figure out that it's tweeting from the same IP address. Maybe they line up the times that you're posting to figure out who it is. And so I would say be really careful with that stuff. And if there's something that you want to say that's in private, then there's no reason that you can't take that directly to the people that you want to talk to. The people that you're trying to speak to on social media, even if it is your private social media, maybe you can just go directly to them and say, hey, talk about whatever topic it is there. So I would be really careful with the private and the anonymous stuff. Again, there's nothing wrong with having opinions and speaking your mind and having beliefs and following people that share those beliefs, but it's about how you make people feel with those beliefs on social media. And so I certainly don't want to make any of you think that you have to think one way or you can't express yourself in a certain way, because that's part of the pyramid too. The very bottom of the pyramid is this good for me? Is this good for myself? Well, if you have a truth that you need to speak or something that you need to say, then it needs to get out there. But I would just make sure that your pyramid is aligned and it's not going to affect anybody on the pyramid before you do that.
And I feel like we have another question from Kelsey. I feel like it sort of ties into this really well. She wants to know, how important is it for kids to be able to be well spoken and able to be visibly show their opinions, thoughts, and goals when speaking to sponsors or on television or even to their like team coach or director?
Yeah, it's important to be able to verbalize stuff outside of just social media. It's really easy to be smart and clever when you have plenty of time and you can, type out your answer and delete this and fix that and change that. But there's also an element of you just have to be, again, goes back to the pyramid of who you are as a person and, what you truly believe, because that's the only way that you can really speak honestly when it comes to that stuff. But Elijah, like we were talking before we came on here, the ability to speak in public or the ability to talk to people or to answer questions and stuff like that is incredibly valuable for a sponsor. Me as an announcer, if I know a rider is well-spoken and I know a rider can answer my questions and they're going to give a good answer and it's going to be well thought out, I'm going to interview that rider every single chance that I get. And if I interview a rider and we have a bad interview, they give me one-word answers. I'm like, how's the race? And they're like, good. How'd you feel? Good. What are you going to do now? Yeah. Sleep. It's like, that person's not getting an interview again, And so you really have to, it's not just about being on social media. And, like I said, you have to be impressive in person to be impressive on social media. So you can't just be good on social media. You can have 20,000 followers, you can have the biggest account out there, but if you get on a live stream or on TV and you can't answer a question in a way and you can't represent your teams and sponsors well, then all that social media is not worth anything, because we see who you really are when we get on TV. So yeah, that's an important part of it. You can't just rely on social media. You have to be able to represent yourself in person too. And it's easy to think, we're kind of getting into this world, this pandemic world, where in-person stuff is becoming less and less important. But we're going to be back to in-person bike races one day. So
yeah. And then we have a question from Melissa. For people who have not like a lot of followers, what is the best way for people who have smaller accounts to sort of get their name out and get more followers?
yeah, I would give two pieces of advice if you're trying to grow followers. The first thing is to engage more. Reply to tweets, comment on Instagram stuff, make it a two-way conversation, and try to have real conversations with people. Try to find people that kind of share those topics that you want to talk about and share your passion, and engage with those people. Start talking with those people. And then the second thing is a lot harder, but it's creating content. And this is really the only fail-safe way to gain followers, to make yourself more valuable on social media, is to start putting content out there. And so start looking for easy ways you can create content. Rides are one of the easiest things, because people are riding every day. Just snap a quick picture, take your Strava map, upload it to Twitter, say, here's the ride I did on Facebook. Whatever it is, if you're training with your team, if you go to a race, just make sure you're updating that stuff on social media. Even if you don't think it's cool, even if you don't think your friends want to see your race or whatever, go post it on Facebook for, the people outside of your circle to see, and just keep creating content.
Yeah, I've noticed, like, when I've posted something on my Instagram story and I've tagged a person, like say for instance I tagged my coach or something, and I go back and look at how many people viewed it, I tend to have a lot more views.
Yep.
I'll tend to get like 50 more views than I normally do, just because I tagged that person. So I try to do that as much as possible.
In social media these days, the algorithms that they use are so crazy that they actually make you see stuff where people are having conversations and talking. So if someone just tweets something and nobody responds to it, it usually gets buried. But if there's a lot of people responding in a conversation and people are talking, the social media companies will sort of serve that up to people when they first log into the app. And so you can get in on that. If you're part of that conversation, you're going to end up sort of in front of more people, and eventually those people become followers.
Yeah. And then we have two more questions. One, it's sort of still dealing with social media. How important is it, they want to know how important is product placement pictures? I guess like what they mean is like, you see all the pictures before a race of somebody, having all their kits and gels and stuff laid out on the bed, tagging their sponsors. Is that as important as like a photo, say, of you riding with all that same gear, but like riding up a hill or down the street?
Not even close. From a sponsor perspective, if you gave me two choices and you said, I'm going to take product photos, I'm going to post a photo with your nutrition product before every ride, and I'm going to do 50 of those on Twitter, or I'm going to do one post with me and my best friend going on the longest ride we've ever done, where I'm going to use your product, that's way more valuable for a sponsor to have something like that. And again, the sponsors want to see you using your pyramid. They want to see you interacting with people, using their products in your pyramid. That's the most valuable thing that a sponsor can get out of a sponsorship with a rider. And so I would say using the products in a real, genuine way in your life, and really sharing with people how you use those products, is going to be much more valuable than a picture that you can take or making sure that the label's out. Of course, you want to do all that stuff, but if you really want to deliver value to a sponsor, I would say they would much rather see you using their product across your social media in a positive way than just seeing their product posted.
Yeah, like a good example I see that is, Michael Garrison is when he's out on the ride and, he's wearing his Oakley glasses. He just doesn't, like hold the glasses out. Like he'll take a picture of him riding with the glasses on.
Yeah,
And
that's the coolest. That's the coolest Oakleys will ever look. You know, Oakleys, they look okay sitting on your bed. They look cool in the box, but Oakleys will never look cooler than, you know, when Michael Garrison is riding at the front of the peloton in Europe. You know, sitting on the front in his action
yeah,
like or what, you know, whatever team it is. That is so much more valuable to the sponsors. And so I would say if you're trying to find value for those sponsors and trying to thank them or give back to them, try and find creative ways that you can sort of use their product or use their company and get it into your life somehow to make sure that it fits. I'll give another quick example. There's a team here in the US that's sponsored by a tax firm, and they do your taxes for you. That's what they do. And so the team all year was posting, hey, thanks for this. Thank you to our sponsor. Thank you to this sponsor, whatever. And they're posting it in June, July, August, September, when they're racing, but people aren't really doing their taxes. And then I had a talk with the sponsor, with the company last week, and they were talking about how, you know, now it's tax time. They moved the tax deadline. You guys, you'll worry about that when you're older, but the team just wasn't really showing people what the company does. They were just saying, hey, thank you, this company. Thank you, this company. We're sponsored by this. We're sponsored by this, sponsored by this. But when it came time to really get that company business and have people, you know, hopefully get their taxes done by that company, the team just wasn't doing that. They were more concerned with, oh, you know, is the logo okay on my jersey, right? Does it look okay in the picture? Well, that logo doesn't do any good if the people at home don't understand what that logo is for, and they don't understand that company.
And
so that's just
and another question from someone that I feel, you know, it ask more you, like, as an announcer at a race, how do you properly like plug or, you know, announce a sponsor, like say a sponsor of the race or, you know, a sponsor of a team or something, like properly, you know, work that into your announcing of the race? So like,
I mean, it's really tough for me because I have almost every sponsor in the sport sort of at one point comes through me, whether it's the sponsor of the race or the sponsors of the team or sponsors of an individual rider or even, you know, my personal sponsors. That's one of the biggest parts of my job. People always say it must be so cool to talk about, you know, racing all the time and talk about bike racing, but I'm not there if there's no sponsors. And so when people ask me what my job is, it's like, are you an announcer that talks about sponsors, or are you a sponsor guy that talks about racing? And I'm really a sponsorship person that talks about racing. That, you know, first and foremost, I'm there to serve the sponsors because they're the ones paying me. They're the ones hiring me. Well, they're the ones paying the race, who's then hiring me. But that's a huge part of my job. My job is not about calling the action. My job is about making my client happy, and my client is the race, and the race's client is the sponsor, and so it goes right down the pyramid. You know, I have to make sure that everyone on the pyramid is taken care of. So yeah, it's a huge part of my job as an announcer, but it's also allowed me to kind of learn what these sponsors want, like we were talking about. You know, before we used to get cards at every bike race, and it was like, read these cards, and it would say, this part of the race is brought to you by company X, and this part of the race is brought to you by company Y. But we don't get those cards anymore because the sponsors realize that that doesn't do any good for the sponsors. So now what they want to see is kind of storytelling. They want to see us mention the product while the riders are using it. Like you talked about Garrison, right? Like riding on the front. Oakley is a great example. I mean, they're a great marketing company. Oakley would much rather hear me say one time, wow, look at Garrison's sunglasses on the front. He looks so cool. Rather than, this race is brought to you by Oakley, featuring the new Oakley, you know, chroma lens glasses, whatever. It's just way more valuable for them to get that sponsor plug while the product is being used. And so that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier of, you know, how do you give a good message to the sponsor? You always have to look at what's best for them. What can I keep doing to add value to them?
So I actually have a couple. I'm going to cut you off a little bit, Elijah, because I have a couple of questions. You know, because I run a junior development team, right? And we have little kids out there. What is the role, say, of the parent and the child relationship? I mean, some of these kids that we have on the call tonight are like 10 years old, right? What is their relationship with the social media?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that social media is still your social media, and you should, kids still need to be kids and still need to race their bikes, and you shouldn't be worried about marketing and sponsors and that kind of stuff when you're a young kid starting out. And so my advice, I guess, for parents with young kids just starting out is to just make sure that we keep kids on a track that's going to allow them to succeed in the future. It's really just about kind of not ruining your social media accounts, before you get old enough. So it's not always about marketing. Again, sometimes the best marketing out there is not marketing at all. A kid that's posting for the love of riding and that's sharing their love of riding on social media is probably going to be better than anything you could ever give a sponsor anyway. But the most important thing, obviously, is that we make sure that the kids are racing their bikes for the right reason and that they're enjoying racing, and it's not a business yet until it's time, until kids get older, maybe 15, 16, 17, you kind of start to learn about that sponsorship world, and you start to learn about the importance of sponsors and brands as you get older. So it's not as important for the young kids, but it will be important as they get older. And so I think it's important to just kind of keep an eye on it as you get further and further into cycling.
And then from my standpoint, as a team director, working in this kind of youth space, I mean, what is my role and responsibility? If I have like a little 6, 7-year-old and they're, extremely cute, right, on the bike, how do I use that to my advantage without undermining, that fun atmosphere that we're really trying to engender in both the parents and the kids and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the same goals go for a team, right? We're all trying to please our sponsors. We're all trying to please everybody on the pyramid. And so as teams, the responsibility, I think, number one has to be to make sure, I should say as junior teams, the number one responsibility has to be on making sure that the riders have a good experience and that everyone's having a good time. And so, for parents that are kind of looking for ways to help their kids and maybe ways to bring sponsors on to a junior team, which is probably maybe the best way that you could help the team as a whole, make it authentic, make it fun, make sure the kids are having fun and enjoying the team, because if that's there, then the sponsors will come. And so, it's kind of a natural fit if you create a good environment for kids that I think more teams and directors will find that sponsors tend to find them when they create a good program and a good atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Elijah, I hated to cut you off there. I mean, you had some other things.
And then we have this is actually a question I was gonna ask in the future. It's from Rom Delbridge. Like, how, as like, say, me as a writer, or my team, how do we deal with, on the other hand, our sponsor making like a negative or bad post on social media? Like, do we drop the sponsor, or like how do we handle that?
Consult your pyramid. I mean, this goes back to your sponsor at the top of the pyramid. And, if something that they said is making you uncomfortable at the bottom of the pyramid, then there's probably other people in the middle of that pyramid that are uncomfortable too. And so I would say, if you find yourself in that situation, start consulting your pyramid. Go to your family first, then kind of reach out to your community. And ultimately, your team will be the last thing kind of between you and the sponsor. But go to those people first and sort of counsel with them and make sure that they know that what this sponsor said made you feel uncomfortable and that you want to address it. And then you can figure out a way that everybody can kind of address it together in a way that, is good for everybody and doesn't put anybody else at risk. And so, but speak up. I mean, because it will happen. You'll see teammates that do inappropriate stuff. You'll have maybe a team director that you're not getting along with, or that doesn't really align with you. So it's okay to realign your pyramid. It's okay to sort of move some of those blocks in and out. Maybe if you're finding that a team is telling you a lot, you can't say this, you can't say that, and it's important to you, then find a new team. Because if you're not happy as a person, then you're not going to be a good bike racer. and no team wants you in that state anyway. And so, you know, number one is you have to make sure that you're serving the base of your pyramid, which is yourself. Be true to yourself, right? But if you do find that other parts of the pyramid are making you or other people uncomfortable, then reach out to the rest of your pyramid and figure out how to fix that and how to smooth it over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know, you know, especially with everything that's, you know, going on now, the whole, you know, Black Lives Matter movement, I know that, you know, a lot of people have different views on it.
Yep.
You know, some people are, you know, juniors on, say, like a bigger junior development team or something like that. They might have a problem with one of their sponsors to, you know, how if their sponsor made a comment about this and they may feel this in this way, you know, that was a good question, you know, to help those juniors, you know, deal with that.
Yeah, and this is, you know, if it's a big thing like what's going on right now with the Black Lives Matters movement, you know, this is a huge conversation that that we all are going to be having with everyone in our lives, with our family, with our communities, with our teams, with our sponsors, and those are conversations that probably shouldn't happen on social media. You know, we've all seen trying to have a constructive conversation on social media very rarely works, and it very rarely do we actually exchange information and, you know, expand our ideas and expand our viewpoints and expand our minds and have a genuine conversation. And so I would say, you know, if you see something that one of those stakeholders says on social media, you know, maybe go directly to them and try and have that conversation and figure out where they're coming from, figure out, you know, make sure that they understand why it makes you uncomfortable, and try and solve it that way. But, you know, I would say don't try and solve it on social media. If you do see something that, you know, either you don't agree with or, you know, you want to call someone out for it, which is a totally, you know, it's very tempting to want to go after someone on social media. But I would say in these situations, in my experience, the best things that I've ever done was to take it offline and go to these people directly and say, hey, what did you mean by that tweet? Because it really made me, and I think it's going to make a lot of other people uncomfortable. Or, you know, here's how I felt about your Facebook post. Is there any way you can change it, or why do you feel that way? And so having that direct conversation with someone, I think outside of social media, is a good way to deal with a disagreement or something else like that would come up. Don't be afraid to reach out to them offline, off of social media. But
I mean,
yeah,
so we've hit the so we've hit the top of the hour, and we don't seem to have any more open questions. So I think this is a really good stopping point. You've done a phenomenal job tonight, Elijah, in guiding the conversation. That was great. And I'll start with you, Elijah. I just have a couple of things that I always like to go through here at the end. When you're a junior, I mean, granted, you're kind of aging, you're out at the upper edge of juniors. But do you have any thoughts, anything that you can share with our younger audience, you know, about how to deal and be motivated during these times?
Yeah, you know, a lot of us, you know, especially like older juniors and juniors that don't have a coach and follow a schedule. Like during the season, we follow a schedule day to day on what to do and stuff like that. You know, as much as we get, you know, attached to that schedule, and now that, you know, time, you know, our training has sort of laxed off, you know, to sort of like doing whatever, you know, try not to rely on the schedule so much, you know, because I feel like if you want to be a professional cyclist, you're going to be following a schedule the rest of your life. So, you know, even though it's kind of hard to stay motivated, just get out and ride your bike for the fun of it, you know, see if you can find a teammate to go ride with for a couple hours, you know, don't really follow a plan, just like go out and ride, you know, be like, well, let's start here and see where we go and get back, you know, that kind of thing. Just have fun with it while you can, because once the season comes back, it's gonna, you know, come back in full force. So, you know, I just want to have fun and take this break from like hardcore training, you know, just to give yourself a mental break evenly.
That's great.
So
Thanks.
that's what I've been doing, you know. having, even with the stuff I do, I'm still having a good time with it.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's a really good advice. And Brad, and your tour of quarantine was, it was a great way for us all to take a little diversion, right? And I have one hardball question, which is, a lot of times I see parents really taking control of their children's social media to keep them really focused and on that track, right? But you can see that there's a lot of times it's contrived, right? It loses that organic authenticity that you've talked about. So do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, mom and dad, we can tell when you're running your kids' social media accounts for sure, because most 7-year-olds don't have the capability to tag 14 different sponsors and understand how all of this works. And so we definitely see that. I would say, as long as for parents, as long as it's not making social media a bad thing for the kids, then it's probably okay for the parents to keep control of it. But if it's becoming a point of contention, and the kids are, we always say a happy bike racer is a fast bike racer, right? And so if social media is becoming a big issue for the kids, then maybe it's time to let them have their own, or at least give them some social media that they can get on, whether that's Strava or let them get on Zwift, something like that. It's a tough line to walk, and honestly, that's up to each individual parent. Obviously, I can't tell people how to parent their kids, but from a marketing standpoint, I would say the best role that parents can have is just keep your kids out of trouble. Just prevent them from saying anything dumb or anything that's gonna hurt their image in the future, rather than trying to promote them from a young age. I don't think social media really has a place yet for the younger juniors to promote themselves, or for the parents to promote the younger juniors. And so I would say the role of the parents is to really just keep the kids out of trouble until they get old enough to really start to go out and start to court, sponsors and teams, and until they have that goal. So I wouldn't be as worried about promoting as a parent of a young junior as I would be with just making sure that you're having that conversation and making sure that kids understand the dangers of social media.
Right. Thanks. I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking, and along those lines, as a team manager, right? I'm out there trying to get sponsors and trying to generate alignment with the youth programming that we're running. And one of the things that from a philosophical perspective, I try to think of us as part of our local community, right? Is that we do local community programming for young kids, and that sometimes juxtaposes against having national oriented sponsors, right? And so what is it, part of me actually wants to go get, the local doctor, orthopedist, right? An orthodontist, and get those people involved with us to a much larger extent than going after, the high-end bicycle manufacturers and things like that. I mean, do you have any comments about that? Any guidance?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is looking at the value that you can deliver to sponsors. The most common, like when we talk about a sponsorship deal, it's always like, well, what can the sponsor do for me? But really the question is, what do you want? People need to be asking the sponsors, what do you want to get out of this? What do you want to achieve? And I think a lot of people will find that they can have a much stronger impact with local sponsors than they ever could with national sponsors. Like I was talking about earlier with a tax preparer or a local doctor, or, there's a lot more chances for the team to kind of interact with them and create good quality connections that actually mean something to that sponsor, than maybe there is with a national brand. And so maybe local and junior teams shouldn't feel as much pressure to deliver national sponsorship to national brands, because they have other properties to do that. That's why, SRAM and Shimano and companies like that. That's why they have world tour teams. That's why they sponsor, these huge, massive teams. And it's not up to local junior teams to do that kind of marketing for them. And so you just have to kind of look at what you can add and what your team can offer to sponsors. And if you have a huge reach and, something that would benefit a national sponsor, then you can go after national sponsors. And if you have a strong connection with the community and you have a wide reach in your community and you can really make an impact there, then go after sponsors there. So it's really about listening to what the sponsors want and then figuring out if you have anything that you can give them.
Right. And we try to do that like with our sponsorship decks and things like that, right? Trying to show those relationships. And then this is another very pointed question and very specific, right? Is within those sponsorship decks, should we be generating something that's specific for that target audience, that local versus national sponsorship track?
Yeah, absolutely. Every sponsor deck that I put together is different. Every sponsor has their own deck because no two pitches are ever alike to two sponsors because they always want, every sponsor wants different things out of the sponsorship. And so I would say if you're looking at a specific sponsor, you're trying to pitch a specific sponsor, a specific brand, research goes a really long way. And juniors can do this too. When you're kind of trying to figure out, how can I thank my wheel sponsor? Maybe your team says, hey, why don't you say something nice about give us team wheels? Look at what other marketing Zip is doing. Look at the message that Zip is putting out there, and then maybe try and line your message up with that. If Zip is all over the internet saying, we have the fastest wheels ever, they're super fast, they're the best in the wind, they're aerodynamic, they're fast. And then, you go on social media and say, hey, I love these Zip wheels because they're strong or because they're cheap. That's good, but that's not the message that maybe Zip is trying to get across with their wheels. And so if you're looking to help a sponsor or you're looking to court a sponsor, always go and look at what else they're doing, what other advertising, what other marketing that they're doing, and see if you can figure out what they're after. See if you can figure out what they want from that.
Well, thank you for that. Just as the final wrap-up question, so let's. And thinking about everything that we've talked about tonight, if you had to really summarize everything into one final statement for the juniors and their parents about how to use social media in a quality way, what would you tell them? What would you tell me?
I guess the most important thing is that being good on social media starts with being a good person. It starts with engaging with your community, with your teammates, with your family, because you have to be in a good place in real life until, before you can get to a good place on social media. And so, if to be impressive on social media and to really give sponsors what they want, you got to get your life, locked down. Make sure that what's happening off the bike is in a good place, and then you can make sure that what's happening on the bike is in a good place. So it's not all about the bike, I guess, is the advice here. Be a good person, live a good life, and the sponsors and stuff will come. All
right. Well, thank you very much, Brad and Elijah, for a great conversation about social media on Junior Bike Chat. And you can find.
I'm going to give a round of applause. I think we got a future announcer on our hands.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, if you ever need some assistance, right, you can reach out to him.
Yeah.
Hey, and any juniors on the call, if you guys have any interest in announcing or working bike races, promoting that kind of stuff behind the scenes, definitely find me on social media and get in touch. And we'll try and get you guys in the loop. I got started really young as a kid in the industry, and I would love to see other kids getting into the biz. So if you're interested in pro cycling, definitely find me on social media.
And I can actually say on behalf of the Redlands Bicycle Classic, I'm the actual registrar for that race. We are always looking for people to work with us in Redlands. And we actually do have kids that do quite a bit for us on the race. All right. So that's I think that's a wrap for tonight. And thank you very much for both Brad and Elijah for coming on.
Thanks, everybody.